Greetings and welcome to another patch notes video here at Words About Games, a weekly video series where we do whatever the hell we want. And this week, we're doing a Final Fantasy VII spoiler discussion, and I've invited my good friend Tori Roberts onto the show for the very first time ever. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the
We
family.
We haven't just been speaking for the last 20 minutes.
No, we haven't been talking.
No.
No, we do it all the time. Every podcast on Words About Games, you always chat for a bit beforehand. You gotta loosen up the brain and the mouth and just chat, so that you're not, so that you're just not like you've forgotten all of the. You ever start a conversation with someone where you haven't spoken for a while, and then you've just forgotten how to say sentences.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing. You got to exercise that brain muscle.
You've got to exercise all of the muscles before you start a podcast. Your brain.
Hang on. I've got to go stretch one second.
Yeah, you've got to stretch like your quads and your what else is there? There's the glutes and those little muscles.
I think that's all of them.
In
That's
your
all
toes.
the muscles.
Like you got those are super important for a podcast.
Don't forget to crack your toes as well.
Yeah, sure. And your fingers and trim your fingernails while you're at it. So
what were we talking about again?
This is a Final Fantasy VII spoilercast, which means from here on out, it's not safe for anyone who hasn't played the Final Fantasy VII Remake that came out earlier this month. And if you think you can't spoil a game that came out in 1997 and was remade in 2020, you would be wrong. So if you haven't played the game, or you actually care about being spoiled of it, run far away from this video. I've got an impressions video up. Have a look at that. There's no spoilers in that. There's going to be spoilers in this, though.
Definitely. Big ones.
100% huge spoilers. So before we get into the deep dive of in specific moments in the remake, I want to know what your top level broad thoughts of Final Fantasy VII Remake was.
Mine. So, I genuinely think they lived up to expectations, and that's a pretty lofty thing to say, but yeah, I genuinely think the game was everything that it should have been and everything that the hype led us to, which is quite rare today, especially with Remake. Like that, it's very rare that a game actually manages to appease such a ravenous fan base, especially after so many years have been teased. For this remake from the PlayStation 3 tech demo to we're showing off Final Fantasy on the PlayStation 4 and it's the PlayStation 1 HD.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of teasing, and so for it to actually live up to expectations, I'm not saying it's perfect, but it does everything I think the fans want in a really delicate and meaningful way.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Obviously, yeah, when I made my impressions video, I was 10 hours into the game. I think I'd stopped at that point to make the video, and then obviously carried on. Now I finished it. I don't remember what my game clock was. I didn't go into the menu for a while. I did I mainlined the last two chapters in one sitting. And that second to last chapter is really long.
It is very long, yeah.
But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I had expectations for this game. In a way, I try not to have expectations for most games, because I'm trying to make not impartial, because they're very partial videos, but I'm trying to make videos about them. So I try to go in with not going, well, it disappointed the expectations I had for it, but that's impossible with a remake of my favorite game of all time. But yeah, it met my expectations. We'll get into specific moments and stuff throughout the discussion, but it was so faithful to the original game in ways that I didn't expect it would be. It was more faithful than I would have expected. But then all the stuff the new stuff that they added for the most part was also really well thought out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, in the ways it wasn't faithful, which we'll probably get to later, it's still, I think, with a lot of insight into the thoughts that have been going on, the way that the game unfolds at the end, it's definitely easy to see that like I was just playing the original again. I finished the remake and went straight onto the original game, and I forgot just how like it's like 1-to-1, and then as well as being like a 1-to-1 remake, they then add loads of stuff around it, and there are some deviations, but I don't think they're for no reason. I don't think that's just Nomura trying to overcomplicate the story. I think there's a purpose behind that.
Yeah, it's like it hits all the beats. So like it hits all the beats that the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII hits, but it expands upon them. Like, and sometimes that's in small ways, and sometimes that's in big ways. So, like the train graveyard, for example, is like it's a huge entire chapter on its own in the remake, and it's like two screens in Final Fantasy VII. Like you push some trains around, you run across them, you fight a couple of ghosts, and then you're off to do the next thing. And then in the remake, it's like it's got its own story arc with its own boss and its own characters, and it was really unexpected and really awesome.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, and it showcased what makes Final Fantasy VII Remake so good, which is that there are these elements of spectacle that they've like scattered throughout the game.
Oh yeah,
Usually in the form of bosses. Like, oh, the bosses blew my mind. But yeah, in general, like everything's been given this extra flavor and time and love and care. I mean, you have to do that when you're turning what is maybe 5 or 6 hours into a 50-hour game. Because I know you mentioned that did you not check the amount of hours you played the game for?
not by the time I finished. I was
Right.
definitely past 30 because I think it was on about
Mm.
30 going into chapter 17. So maybe about
Yeah.
35, pushing
Mm.
35 hours.
And I think that's a very modest and like clean amount of gameplay to have for something that's just part one of what's going to be a bigger series. But I didn't do all the side quests, but I managed to hit 48 hours. And the main reason why I skipped some of the side quests is just because the main story is that good. Like I wanted to see what happened next, even though the side quests, even though they were a little bit like MMORPG-ish, a little kind of like Final Fantasy 15 side quests, almost better. Um, the main story is that good and that gripping that you kind of don't want to slow the pace down. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with that. So my 35 to 40 hours with the game. Um, I left some stuff on the table. Like I never went back to the Coliseum. I never went back to the gym.
Mm.
Like I never did any of that optional stuff. I never played whack a box on. I didn't try to get on top of the dots leaderboard. I did do all of the side quests, like as much as you can in the first playthrough, because there's 26 side quests, but you can only do 24 in one playthrough because the chapter where you're in Wall Market, you can only do there's 4 side quests. There's 2 for like 2 different characters. You
Hmm.
can only do like 2, and then it locks you out of the other 2.
Right, right.
So you'd have to do
Hmm.
a second playthrough of that chapter to do all of the side quests. But when I was like to your point as well, it was like I did just want to get on with the main story to the point that when I was doing the side quests in the last part, I was like chapter 13, I think it was. Was the last sort of
Mm.
side quest section. There was like 6 or some. There was like a 6 or 8 side quests, and I just turned the difficulty down, and I was like, cool. I want to do the side quests because in the previous chapters, like doing all of the side quests unlocked an extra scene, and the
Hmm.
extra scene was really worth like seeing. Um,
Oh, I haven't experienced that, I don't think. I think I skipped 2 side quests because I was like, you know what, I've done most of them. I want to carry on with the story.
so what happened was,
Oh.
so I'll go through the whole story because this is a spoiler cast. We got time, and I can just talk about whatever I want.
Hmm.
This is not like a
Yeah.
review. I'm unleashed now, Tori. I'm unleashed. I just get to talk about
Yes.
whatever I fucking want for the first time
Oh gosh,
since
language.
since Final Fantasy VII Remake. Since I started playing it, I've had to button up, right, and not talk about
Hmm.
anything. So I'm finally just sorry, but you're here. You're gonna get the whole full brunt of it.
Good.
So yeah, the first chapter where you do the side quest, I was still trying to get to grips with the combat,
Mm.
because there's a flaw to it, but it takes a little bit of getting used to. So I was like, cool. All the side quests are revolve around the combat. So
Mm.
it's a good opportunity to get used to like switching the characters and like figuring out when to use what abilities and whatnot. So I did all the side quests in that chapter, and at the end of the chapter, you go back to wherever Cloud and Tifa are staying in Sector 7, and they
Mm.
have a conversation. afterwards, which is prompted by completing all of the side quests, and then later on in Sector 5, when you do all the side quests when you're with Aerith, the same thing happens. So you finish all the side
Yeah.
quests, there's another scene where you talk to Aerith in the flower garden. She's talking to the flowers, and it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. So
I
like,
need to see. I don't think I saw that.
yeah, you need to see it. It's really cool.
Mm.
And like, I can't remember specifically if there was a special scene at the end of that last lot, but because I had the motivation, like the side quests weren't great. Like they were definitely like filler to pad out the
Yeah.
runtime a little bit, but at the same time, I was like, I had that motivation of being like, there might be something really worthwhile at the end of it, so I powered through on easy.
That's fair. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't need the filler either. The game,
No.
like, if it was just pure story, start to finish, no stopping, no going, no hub worlds, which, by the way, I do like. I love, like, Wall Market and these other cities that you can walk around in towns and stuff. I love that.
Oh, Market was so fucking
And
great.
I can't wait to talk about just, like, for example, when you first go into the slums off the train and you turn around and you see, like, the giant core center of Midgar, and then
Yeah.
you see the plates above you. Holy crap, like, that for me sent, like, shivers down my spine and made me well up, because I was like, they did it. Like, the first chapter and stuff with, like, bombing the Mako reactor, that was, like, a pure, like, just glorious, like, hour that
Yeah.
really told you, like, this is what the game's potential is. And then you think, oh, well, after the hour, it's probably just going to mellow out and become quite a filler kind of game. And like, when I got off the train and saw that, I was like, nope. Like, that wasn't just their way of showcasing a way to sell the game, you know? I knew that they were going to keep that same passion running through the entire game. And wow, it was very overwhelming for me.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the love that went into the game in certain sections, and the reverence, the respect that they had for the original.
Yeah, you can tell that they loved the game. Like, there's probably a lot of younger developers that are our age that are working on that game, and because it looks as if it was made and feels like it was made by people who love the game, not just those that work on games in general.
Yeah, definitely. Like, people who are like influenced to maybe get into video game development by playing Final Fantasy VII back in the day.
Yeah, and that's where we are now with game development. We have these people that are like, when I grow up, I want to work for this game company, and then it happens. Like the Breath of the Wild, the amount of people that worked on Breath of the Wild that grew up being fans of it and being fans of Nintendo, and then worked on stuff like Splatoon 2 and stuff like that. And
yeah,
it's amazing.
The game development can be amazing.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of passion brought back into the industry in a way that I didn't really see in the Xbox 360 era. We saw innovation, but not as much passion as what we're seeing today, I don't.
I might have to schedule another video where we talk about that, because that sounds like a really interesting podcast to talk about. But let's dive into some specific stuff of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And
Let's do that.
The thing that I've wanted to talk about for a while now, which is not just the ending. Like, I want to say the ending, but that's reductive. Where it's like, it's the ending, but it's also the whispers. And
oh yeah,
that whole storyline.
I've got some stuff, but I want to know what you know first.
The one thing that wasn't in Final Fantasy VII.
The main thing.
Back in the day,
we can get to loads of small things.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of small stuff, but
we can talk about that after.
Yeah,
Let's talk about the main thing.
The whispers specifically, like, intrigued me, like, because I was like, well, what's this? Because I get, like, other changes that we might talk about, that we'll probably talk about later on, things like the expanded roles of, like, Jesse, Biggs, and Wage and stuff, like, that's new, but I get that, and I get why that's in the game. Like, even, like, playing the demo at EGX last year, or just, like, watching trailers and stuff for it, it's like, I get why that's in the game, because that's just expanding on the story. But what's the deal with Sephiroth and these weird cloaked shadow dementors? Like, was my question. I was like, what's that for? Like,
yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like, at first I was thinking, like, oh, Nomura just did a Nomura.
Yeah, I was like,
he did a Kingdom Hearts on my Final Fantasy VII.
I was having horrible thoughts that, like, this is going to go in the same direction as Kingdom Hearts. Oh no, I'm going to hate it. Because I'm not a fan of Kingdom Hearts, but
me neither. Holy crap! Like, there's not many of us.
I know, right? It feels like we're like on a small island of there's about 6 or 7 of us.
We all tried. We all tried to love that franchise too, I'm sure.
I did. It was Disney and it was Square and it was Final Fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, cool, I like all this stuff, but no. So, my experience with the Whispers going through the game was
Mm-hmm.
I kind of figured out what they were doing and why they were there in Chapter 12.
Mm-hmm.
Which is we definitely will talk about, because that chapter had an effect on me. Like I remember texting you. I remember texting you after I played it. Like I was in pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of figured out what was going on with them there. So they turn up at different parts of the story. The first time you see them is the first time you meet Aerith. They turn up when you fight Reno. They turn up when the planet's being collapsed, and then they start turning up more and more at the end. The moment I definitely knew what they were doing was when Sephiroth killed Barrett.
Yep.
In Shinra HQ.
That happened.
And apparently that was in the launch trailer, which I didn't watch.
I didn't either, actually.
Thankfully. Apparently that moment was in the launch trailer. It was spoiled for a few people. I had no idea it was coming. So I was playing through that chat. I lost it. I lost my fucking mind when that happened.
Yeah, same. Especially because, like, they developed Barrett into probably one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters ever with this game. Like you said earlier, if we go back a little, they've expanded on things very naturally. So of course, Biggs and Wedge and Jesse have a bigger role in the story, and so do everyone. You know, even like a lot of the side characters from the original too. But the Whispers really have been the biggest unnatural change, I guess you could say. And with moments like that, that's when you really feel like, oh, they're not just making the game linear. This isn't just a way to push the player around and become an obstacle. This actually has a reason to it. The Whispers have a purpose to them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
It hit me hard too.
I lost my mind. I lost my shit. I was like, what have they done? What are they doing? And then obviously, as it turns out, the Whispers bring Barrett back to life. And it quickly becomes apparent. Although to be like I said, to be fair, I'd pretty much figured it out about halfway through the game. Like, so the Whispers are basically fate or destiny, and they're essentially they're trying to make it so that the events of the original Final Fantasy VII happen. Or at least the bigger events anyway, because there are some smaller differences that they don't change, but it feels like they're just trying to guide it so that the big stuff happens in the correct order.
Well, I think that they also, when they don't change smaller things, I think that's because they didn't get to intervene, or didn't have the opportunity, or didn't oversee those changes.
Yeah.
Because there are some things that have happened in this story that should have happened in the original. But I totally agree. Stuff like the scenes when they're trying to collapse the plate, and you get held up by the ghosts and you can't progress, because if you went there straight away, you'd have got there before you're meant to get there, and then that would have changed the entire story potentially. You know, you may have got killed in the onslaught that happened above before you get there, and I see that, but there's like smaller things too, more subtle things, and it pulls into question who's in control of the Whispers. So stuff like when Cloud sleeps deeply quite early in the game and wakes up to all the ghosts, like that, the ghosts make him sleep deeply, and it sounds like it's Sephiroth's voice, but I'm not sure if it is or not. I haven't returned to the game yet to check that out, but he sleeps deeply, and that was the ghost's way of making sure that he woke up when they needed him to, because otherwise most likely would have woke up many times in the middle of the night, and he probably would have been up early. So there's loads of miniature ways in which it intervenes too, but then there's some stuff that's changed, and the ghosts, the Whispers, don't actually seem to have been involved, and a lot of that stuff is at the very end of the game. But there is stuff also throughout as well.
Yeah, I started having my suspicions during that chapter, like, because you spend an entire chapter where it's like, okay, so in the original Final Fantasy VII, like, Cloud is instantly offered like the position to go on the next bombing run, like to bomb the next reactor, and in Remake that doesn't happen. They come back and they're like, and Barrett's like, sorry, but you're not coming. Jesse's coming, and I was like, okay, like, maybe they're just going in a different direction with the story. And then Cloud does his side quest, goes to bed, sleeps, and then you wake up the next morning and the Whispers are attacking. Jesse gets injured, can't go on the mission, so Cloud goes instead. And at that point, I was like, I'm suspicious now. Like, I've got my suspicion hat on.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, the next time you see them is when you fight Reno. When Cloud goes to kill Reno, the Whispers push him out of the room, and I was like, it sure seems like these Whispers exist to make Final Fantasy VII happen exactly like I remembered it.
It's almost as if it's not happening in the same timeline, or at least at the same instance. Like this isn't the events of Final Fantasy VII. This is clearly either a thread or an alternate bubble or whatever you want to call it of Final Fantasy VII's event.
Yeah.
And that's why the ghosts can seem so intrusive. Like these Whispers can seem very intrusive at times. And at the beginning of the game, like a lot of players are going to play this and not get it.
Yeah.
Until either too late or after the game's finished, and they're gonna I can't believe they stopped me from grabbing that materia in the church, blah blah blah. Like, what the hell were they doing? They were just stretching the game out, blah blah blah. But
the
reality is that they were being very very smart, because there is many things that also seem to be playing up that this isn't Final Fantasy VII. This isn't the events that took place originally. So stuff like this is a big bombshell to drop, so you may already suspect this, but Sephiroth isn't Sephiroth. He isn't the Sephiroth. He's a different one, probably from the future, which sounds very strange, but he seems to come from a place in the future. I mean, for starters, he has the wing, which he never gets in Final Fantasy VII. He only attains that wing in Advent Children, which suggests that he's from Advent Children. That's why the black feathers that appear and stuff. That is not the present-day Sephiroth.
No, because he knows the entire story. He knows exactly what's going to happen in Final Fantasy.
Exactly.
In Final Fantasy,
So
he basically he's like us. Like, he knows what happened in that original game.
He knows his own fate.
Yeah, and he knows he's going to lose, and he knows that's what fate has in store, because that's what happened the first time.
Definitely, that's why he's playing with Cloud so much. That's why he's playing with his head even more than he ever did in 7, the original. And there's little things like the fact that in 7. The meeting of Cloud and Aerith is very clean and simple and almost warm. But in the remake, Sephiroth tries to hold Cloud back from meeting Aerith at the time that she needs to be met to make 7 happen. And instead what happens is Aerith is surrounded by the ghosts to ensure that she's still there when Cloud goes that way. So there's always a way that they're intervening. And this is why I'm so excited to play through the game again. Because this is slowly unraveling to something on the scale of Dark Souls or Bloodborne, with this deeper hidden meaning that completely recontextualizes not only the fact that it's a remake, but the fact that it also seems to, this remake is also in the same universe as the original, as a separate instance.
Yeah.
And for me, that makes it so much more special. It seems to me like Nomura finally pulled off the kind of scale of depth that he's been trying to do for a long time now. Like, to me, it seems like he's finally done it,
Yeah. So, all that being said, that's how the Whispers affect Final Fantasy VII Remake. Let's talk about how they're going to affect whatever Part 2 is going to be called, because I don't think it's going to be called Remake Part 2.
No.
I have thoughts on that title now that I've played Remake. So after everything, you do the motorbike scene like you do at the end of the game, at the end of the first part of Midgar in the first game. I like the fact that the tank boss was a boss on the bikes. Like, you get off to fight it. It's like, yeah, of course, you just keep driving. And
it was brilliant. Like, so smart.
We
need to talk about the bosses separately as well.
We definitely will.
Like, some of these boss fights literally are like the greatest boss fights I've ever played in a game.
I do love the boss fights. I'm going to stick with the ending for now, though. We'll get back to the boss fights.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
This. I feel like if anyone's like looking into doing like a Final Fantasy VII spoilercast, this is the thing they want anyone who's talking to talk about the ending. So you get to the end of the game. And then instead of just leaving Midgar, like, you do, they climb down on the rope in Final Fantasy VII, and then they go their separate ways. Which is where I was expecting the game to end from everything that had been said. But instead, it gets a bit weird. I'm gonna try and describe what happens
That's fine with me, yeah.
as literally as possible, and then we're gonna talk about what this means for the future. So you get to the end of the road. Sephiroth's there. He's giving it all that. He's talking shit like he's been doing the entire time you've seen him in the game, and then he's talking about destiny. He slices open a hole in reality. Would be a fair way to describe it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to describe it. He kind of creates a separate, like, reality, or like another instance of the world in a way. Perhaps, I don't know. That is something that's very. It's down to interpretation. There's many ways that could be taken, but yeah.
Yeah, you step through it. So like Aerith and Red 13 are talking about fate and destiny, and if you go through this hall, like Aerith's specific quote was like, "What happens if we go through?" And it's like the boundless, terrifying freedom. Which is a good metaphor for the sequel. It is a good metaphor for the sequel. So you go through. This is where the Whispers live, I guess. There's one giant one who summons some bosses. You do a lot of fighting, and you eventually kill. Essentially, you basically kill Destiny. So as much
to some degree, yeah.
As much as the Whispers are like shepherding you down the path of like the original game in Remake, the implication is in the next game anything goes. Like there isn't going to be that guiding force now of no, you can't do this, can't happen because that didn't happen the first time, and it needs to go on the path.
Yeah, but the thing is, from what I saw, because there's some things I've been looking into, and it seems to me like, you know, when you fight the three Whispers that are representative of Cloud, Tifa, and Barret,
yeah,
they don't represent Tifa, Barret, and Cloud. They don't. I know that one fights with their fists and one has a sword and one has guns, but that's the thing. Like the one that punches has a big, like one big fist to punch with, and the guns, there is two of them, not one. And the sword is a one-handed sword, which is actually of Laz, Yazoo, and Kadaj from Advent Children, and they seem to represent those characters, not just meant to be material versions of Cloud, Barret, and Tifa. So it seems to me like that was a manifestation of Sephiroth's ability to control the Whispers, because I feel that the planet is controlling the Whispers to guide Aerith. But then there are some that are controlled by Sephiroth as he tries to manipulate not only the planet from being in its core or what have you, whatever moment that he's diving into the past through, but he clearly has some control over them. And that's what I noticed with those three. Was that they seem to they definitely the thing is as well, you really should check out the podcast, the thing that Maximilian dude did. It's called Spoiler Mode. Sorry to plant another one in there, but if so, like I don't know
Easy Allies.
But, yeah,
he was
so
on
I
Easy Allies, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'd definitely recommend listening to that if you want to hear just how deep the story goes. Because it was mind blowing. It was like revelatory to like hear like just how much deeper the story is than even the things that I'd picked up on. And I thought, I was like, I look pretty deep into this, but maybe it's all just in my head. But no, like, yeah, like moments like that, because they fight the same way that they do in Advent Children too. They fight just like Sephiroth's children in Advent Children, which I found very interesting.
There was a couple of moments in Remake where there was some of the musical, like signature music from Advent Children came through.
Just after Aerith and Cloud, just before Aerith and Cloud meet, like when Aerith looks around, there is the piece of music from Advent Children, which is meant to represent Sephiroth's presence around her. And that suggests again that he's not the Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII.
I mean, he definitely isn't, because they're fundamentally different characters. Like, if you've played both games, like it's pretty obvious early on that this isn't the Sephiroth that you know.
Yeah, he seems more relaxed, but also his actions are more desperate. If you know what I mean, like he's trying to intervene a lot more than he did in the past. Not just because they're trying to fill it out more and because we want to introduce him sooner. It is definitely because he is more desperate to change the past. And in the original game, he had no reason to change the past because he was in the present alongside them.
Yeah, he didn't know.
Uh,
He didn't know how it was going to go down.
no way he would have intervened in the ways that he did in this remake
Yeah.
because he had no foresight like he does now.
Well, you never see him in FF7 at all at
During
this
the
point.
Midgar section.
Like he's a presence towards the end, and he's in the Shinra building at the same time. You're in the Shinra building, like in Remake, but all you ever see is his aftermath, like what happens in his wake. For a long time.
Yeah.
Like in Final Fantasy VII, he's like a looming presence as opposed to a direct antagonist.
Which was amazing.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to that in the remake. Like, I can't. The one moment I was like, the game is going to end shortly after the present of Shinra has been found with the sword through him. I thought that was going to be it. And when that didn't pan out that way, again, why did the ghost stop the president from being killed in the same way? Why was Sephiroth late? You know? But I think we've diverted quite far away from the ending at this point.
These are all fascinating questions that I'm sure are going to be talked about in the next game, because like that's what's most exciting about this. Like I get that because the marketing for this game was quite subversive, because it was presenting itself as this is a straight remake of Final Fantasy VII. It's you're gonna get the original game but completely remade. And it'll have extra story beats, and it will expand upon stuff, but it's going to be very straightforward, and it was more or less for like the first 95% of it. But now, it's like it's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. Like they've taken the shackles off, because now anything can happen. Like I still feel like in the future installments, like however many there are, they're still going to hit most of the main beats.
Yeah, I think fate will intervene again in the future. I feel that in a way, and I don't want to be like, this could be spoiling the next game, but I'm not worried, but I'm expecting some form of them giving the feeling of freedom. And I feel like in some way Sephiroth is giving the illusion of hope and freedom. He's allowing the cast to have that. Only so that he can pull it from them and dive Cloud into deeper anguish. So the big beats and stuff like, oh, we can change the future now, like the feeling that, oh, we've seen what will happen to Aerith, which is one of the biggest like moments in a video game.
Yes, one of the most iconic deaths in video game history.
Yeah, and also one of the most spoiled things of all time.
Yeah.
But clearly they're trying to set up like the player like, well, we don't know what's going to happen next. And as someone who felt like they were going to be quite a Puritan of Final Fantasy VII Remake, who thought that anything that they added would potentially ruin what made 7 special in the first place, the fact that they've changed it actually excites me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be excited if the game wasn't so good. Like if the game wasn't executed so perfectly and the remake of the elements that I wanted weren't all there and all as perfect as what they are, I would have been worried. But no, instead I'm very, very excited for what they do next.
They've done it in a way where they've respected the original game. It reminds me of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot. I know, totally random aside. But that's the alternate timeline stuff where they go back in time and change it. So, like, the original stuff, the original universe, if you will, still happens. And then this new universe is built on something familiar while also being different. Like, or having the ability to be different. And that's what they've done here. Where all of Final Fantasy VII still happens and it's still its own thing, and now this remake is something different. Like, I don't think they're going to go buck wild and change like the entire rest of the story from here on out. Like, I still think you'll still hit like all of those major iconic beats from the original Final Fantasy VII. Like, you'll still hit those. Like, the amount of, again, I go back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video, where it's like I was surprised by how faithful they were to the original Final Fantasy VII. And I feel like they'll continue that going forward. And certain things might be different. Like, say when they go to Juno, for example, like some different stuff might happen because now it can. But they'll still go there, and then they'll still get on a boat, and then they'll still go across the sea. I think that's the sort of direction the next part of Final Fantasy VII is going to take.
Yeah, I agree. I do feel that things are going to change quite a little, because there was the very end of the end that we didn't discuss, which was that Zack is potentially alive.
Yeah, I
Like
don't. That's the
Zack
one
did
part I don't get.
die. Right. So this is part of this weird theory, which is that did you notice that the ghoul, like the whisperers, like were 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 all circling Midgar at the same time that Zack was walking towards it, but he was walking towards them while the ghouls were there, like
Yeah,
these whispers. But it was happening in the current time as well. And I get the feeling that these ghosts don't necessarily work in a linear fashion.
yeah,
Maybe they're just like they're omnipresent, so they're everywhere. So when something's happening somewhere, it could be happening there in the past too. It's very confusing, but it's stuff like seeing Biggs wake up, and that wasn't meant to happen.
no,
Biggs wasn't meant to wake up, and neither was and Zack wasn't meant to live. But he took Cloud back to Midgard, which I think tells you, the player, at the very end that this is different, and here is like the seed that made it start differently. Like
right,
seeing
yeah.
Zack walk towards Midgard with Cloud shows that this isn't the same timeline. Like it's a nice way to just tell the player there and then, like, look, all your theories of this not being the same, like Midgard, the same Final Fantasy VII, this is literally hard evidence that that is not the case.
Which makes me curious because in the original Final Fantasy VII, and mostly actually in Crisis Core, like let's be fair, but in the to get really nerdy about it, like
Yeah.
the reason like Cloud is the way he is because Zack dies fighting all of the Shinra soldiers. Cloud's brain's all fucked up because he's been experimented on with Mako, and he kind of assumes Zack's identity, takes his sword, goes to Midgard, and the events of Final Fantasy VII happen. So I'll be interested to see what, like, if Zack is alive,
Yeah.
how that all of that other stuff still happened. Because Cloud still thinks he was a soldier. Spoiler alert, he wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, Hojo even comments on that, which again is something
Yeah,
that the ghosts were too late to stop. The
yeah. It's like he
whispers were
says
too
it. I don't
late
know if
to
it's
stop
sunk in with Cloud, and
Pardon?
they carry him away before he has a chance to explain it because it's too soon for him to learn that. But
Yeah, but again, that was another moment where they weren't quick enough, and there's been moments like that throughout the game. Like, why the hell did Big survive? Like I mentioned, and same for Zack. Like, what happened to Zack, and why is Cloud the way he is? If Zack lived, and there's tiny touches too that show that they cared, in the sense that Zack grabs Cloud right where the what is it called now? It's in Advent Children.
it's the peak. It's where he puts the yeah.
Yeah, it's whether it's geostigma. That's what it was. The where Cloud's geostigma was. He grabs him tightly on the arm right there.
Yeah.
And so there's like clearly, like, again, that's linking like Crisis Core to Advent Children in some regard, and like they're really playing with the timeline a little, and I get this horrible feeling that they're gonna keep doing that, and I just hope that it pays off the same way that it has with the with Remake.
Yeah, like Remake was
Because
such a great accomplishment, I think.
yeah, I think they've got it set up now. They don't need to go any deeper with this. They just need to keep playing the same theme throughout. Because I get the feeling that Jessie's not dead either.
I hope not.
No, I don't think
loved
she
her.
is.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, her death was really powerful in this game.
It was.
So I don't know if I would want to see it undone. Like, I'm in two minds of it. It's like how I've always thought about what if Aerith didn't die in Final Fantasy VII? It's like, well, that would be awesome because I love Aerith. But at the same time, it's always like, but her death was so powerful and impactful and meaningful. It's like, I don't know if I'd want it to be undone.
I get the feeling that it will have to happen, and it wouldn't surprise me if Aerith this time is prepared to die.
I think she
rather
already
than it
knows
being a
everything that's
surprise.
going to
Yeah.
happen.
Well, she was the one when she placed her hand upon Red's head. She wasn't just taming him. You could see the Mako energy around her hand. It's the Mako energy and the planet itself that has given her all this information ahead of time. Like, if you look at the way that Final Fantasy VII ends and the way that Aerith is introduced, it's the exact same pose, which gives the sensation that perhaps this takes place in a time where, just as Final Fantasy VII ends, and she gets this vision, like 7 is essentially like a vision that she's then foretold at the very start of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah, like when she's kneeling down and she's looking into the Mako, and it's like she sees the whole thing, and then
it's almost like 7 was a vision of what the bad ending is, because when you see a flicker of like, oh, this is what will happen if we don't win, you see the ending to Final Fantasy VII, which suggests that Final Fantasy VII is now the bad ending. It's the bad result that they're trying to avoid. And I think Aerith already knows all of it, because the way that she's like, no, that's wrong, when being asked questions and stuff, suggests that she already knows all of this. She knows all of it, and she shared that with Red when she placed her hand up on his head.
Yeah, because Red knows a bunch of stuff, and I kind of figured out it was like a mind meld kind of type situation.
Yeah, he didn't know about the whispers himself, but once she placed her hand on his head, he knew these things.
Yeah,
and
because he even says it outright. It's like once Aerith touched his head, like that was where he got the knowledge of the whispers from.
So I feel he already knows everything, and she must have already known. And she wasn't given this during the game, so it must have happened right at the beginning. Which makes me think that the ending to Final Fantasy VII is actually the very beginning of Remake.
Yeah, like the thing happens, and because in the original Final Fantasy VII, before, like, there's the scene which you see in this game like multiple times with Red running through the wilderness towards a reclaimed Midgard like 500 years in the future. But the scene before that, I'm trying to remember how Final Fantasy VII ends just before that, where it's like meteor's about to hit, the live stream thing happens, there's a bright white flash of light, and then you don't really know like what happens next.
Yeah.
And the specific choreography even of that scene would tie quite nicely into it being like, and then Aerith is kneeling in front of the Mako, like at the beginning of Remake, and that she just saw all of that.
And the thing is, like, the visions Cloud got as well, when the music's going da da da, you know what I mean? He's also receiving visions.
Well, he sees the
Final
past,
Fantasy VII.
which makes sense, like, because that's what he's seeing throughout Final Fantasy VII, where it's like he's flashing back to 5 years ago. But he also sees stuff from the future, which is like, oh, okay, this is weird. Like, why is he seeing this?
Exactly, and maybe that is what's screwing him up and making him think that he's the Cloud of Final Fantasy VII. Maybe that's why when he was sat seeing and there was two clouds, maybe one of those clouds is the original Cloud, and the Cloud that we see is the Cloud who has imprinted himself on the original rather than Zack instead.
My head hurts now.
I know. That's the first thing I just came up with myself. Well, mostly without the research that I've looked into. That to me just makes sense. Yeah.
Fair enough. I'm really, really looking forward to the future of Final Fantasy VII, because, like I said, I don't think they're going to change that much, but at the same time they could. Like, that's what I feel like the moment with Barrett was there to highlight. Like, that in the future, something like this could happen, and there won't be whispers around to fix it. Like, from a narrative, not from like in-game like storyline. I just mean from like a narrative construction thing. It's like that's what that scene was there for, because especially happening so close to the end, it was like, yeah, we could kill Barrett, like. And next time, maybe the whispers won't be around to bring him back to life.
Yeah, I don't think they're protecting Midgar, though. I mean, they could be, and maybe that's why they represent the dome, that they maybe can't escape. But I feel as if Aerith knows too much, and so does Red, to know that they can't intervene too far away from what happened. Because if they intervene too far away from the events of Final Fantasy VII, perhaps they won't even save the world. But it seems like an open book. Like, it's not going to be as predictable as we thought the first remake was going to be.
Yeah, it's not going to be like, it's not going to be like familiar to you and me who've played Final Fantasy VII God knows how many times. Like, it's gonna be new for us as well as new for other people, because I've talked to people who have played Final Fantasy VII, like Remake, who never played the original, and then you tell them things like, oh no, the whispers were never in the game, like that's completely new, and it's like, what, really? The only thing that people who are new to Final Fantasy VII with the remake were confused about was the ending.
Yeah, but, I mean, Zack is like a new character to them.
Yeah, so is Sephiroth, which I found interesting, where it's like they never... because you don't get the explanation of who Sephiroth is until later on in the story. It's like, it's the very next thing that happens in the original game, but in this game, you never get that explanation. He's just here.
Yeah.
Doing stuff.
I think that makes sense, though, because even in the original game, he was still this, like, ghoul, this ghostly thing that you only saw the actual actions of. rather than himself. And I feel like seeing him in the remake gives a similar level of confusion and mystery, which I can't like. I've only played it briefly with my sister in terms of like people, people that haven't experienced the original, but she didn't seem too confused by Sephiroth. I think to her, she saw him as like this thing that's haunting Cloud. And I think that's enough to carry him until there's an explanation.
Yeah, like, I feel like we'll get that explanation very quickly in the next game, because that's the very next thing that happens, and I think that'll still be the next thing that happens. Because Barrett and, well, actually just really Barrett doesn't know who Sephiroth is. I'm guessing everyone else kind of does at this point. Because of timeline fuckery, but like, yeah, because it's very well known as this is a TP continued moment, and like it even says at the end of the game, like the unknown journey will continue, like then it's less of an issue. Whereas if like it was the end of the game and everyone was like, well, what the fuck, like, you know what I mean, like then it would have been a bigger problem. But it'll be the very next thing that's explained. in the saga. So yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Thing is, with the sequel, we get to see is it Bugenhagen or Bugenhagen?
Yes.
The man who explains a lot of stuff that's going on in that universe. And I feel like he's gonna have a different story to tell. I feel like events are gonna unfold that are gonna be which are gonna show just the extent of how much time is being played with. Like Jessie dying, for example. I have a weird feeling that she genuinely isn't dead. Like,
yeah.
And same goes for Biggs. Like, he woke up, but how is he gonna play in this story when now we're nowhere near Midgar?
Yeah, it's like you don't go back to Midgar until towards the end of the original Final Fantasy VII.
And Zack goes to Midgar too at the end of the very end of the game, which is also takes place before the game. Yeah. And there's no saying that he's outside of Midgar now.
Lots of really interesting questions.
Some of the characters, some of the characters seem locked into that Midgar setting.
Yeah,
and
like I never thought I'd have this many questions after I'd finished playing. Like, I always figured the only question I thought I would have is, cool, when's the next one? Like, and that is one of the questions, but it's also like, cool, when's the next one? Because I need you to explain what you're doing. Like,
honestly, if this was just the game, the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the idea was that this is just a standalone story, I'd feel pretty satisfied with this. Like, it's one of them games that's going to stick in my mind until the remakes, the sequel's out, because it pulled me in a way that I don't think a game has done in a long time, in terms of story anyway.
Yeah, like the original Final Fantasy VII narrative had that power, because it was one of the most compelling narratives that I played in a video game, like, around that time ever. And because it is so respectful of what came before, it has that same effect where it's like, this is one of the most compelling stories in a video game. Like, yeah, sure, it's a bit weird, it's a bit goofy in places, it's very strange at the end.
As was the original, though.
Yeah,
the original was also very goofy.
But then it's like, you see, like, the relationships that actually build between Cloud and Barrett, between Tifa and Aerith, like, you don't get to see in the original game, like, because they're given room to expand and breathe, and like, it makes the story so much better.
Yeah, the character interaction is finally like, it's how you imagined it as a child or whenever people played it, and then some.
Yeah,
because they finally made human characters. Like, you play Final Fantasy 15, you play Kingdom Hearts. These are narrative story characters that are interacting to make the story happen. They're not really that. They don't feel like people. Like this, you have to suspend your belief when playing a game like 15 or Kingdom Hearts, because they just don't feel like real people. Like in Final Fantasy 12, for example, they feel like real people. I dare say even games like the original 7, Final Fantasy 7, they felt like real people. And in 9, I haven't played 8, so I can't say. But, Final Fantasy had this, like, amazing feeling, like, even in the Super Nintendo days, of making characters feel like believable people.
Yeah.
And then there was this phase, it was when Nomura jumped in. Like, all of his games make it feel like they are merely cogs to progress a very convoluted narrative. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's not for me. And
Oh,
so I was worried
100%.
he was going to
Like,
carry that into 7. That was my main worry, is that 7 looks amazing, but is he going to make the characters feel like it's a pantomime?
yeah,
That is mainly there to make sure that things happen. And instead, he kind of subverted expectations by flipping it. So the characters that are exactly like dreamlike, that you couldn't imagine the cast being any better. They're incredibly deep and involving and impressive characters. Like, I cried so many times playing Final Fantasy VII Remake.
same.
Like, more times than I've cried playing any game, I dare say, currently. And a lot of the scenes were like, even the things like Barrett with Marlene, like, those moments were like so touching. And sometimes it's down to the way that things are said and the way that it's done. Like, the production values are incredible for it. Sometimes the small things, how they made, like, it seems now like Barrett hides his eyes behind these sunglasses because he has very kind eyes. And that's just one thing that you can't get with a PlayStation 1 game, but his eyes look very warm. And so he tries to hide that from the outside world, you know? And yeah, so there's like so many moments where this cast has an opportunity to shine, like the new stuff, like with Jesse, going to like Jesse's house. And even though it's done in a really obtuse way, you really get a stronger grasp of who Jesse is as a character. And also like how the cast intermingle in a way that is outside of the main plot line, which is obviously very grandiose. You get to see these more intimate switch.
Yeah, like in Final Fantasy
Really
VII,
benefits the game.
the original had like great main characters, who've like withstood the test of time. But at the same time, you don't get enough space in that game. And it's not Final Fantasy VII's fault in any way. It's just the way games were made at the time. But you don't get a lot of space to see the characters just interacting with each other for no reason other than to see them interact with each other. And in this game, you get that a lot. Most, like, especially between the 4 main characters, between Cloud and Barrett and Aerith and Tifa. And so like you get these wonderful like just moments between them. Like the scene in Don Corneo's mansion when Tifa and Aerith kick the crap out of Corneo's goons is awesome in its own right. And then and then it's like when it's done, it's like they're like, yeah, we did it, high five, you know, they high five each other, and then they compliment each other like, you're amazing. It's like, no, you were amazing, and like shit, Aerith starts shadowboxing like with all those moves that you're doing. And there's so many moments like that in this game that couldn't exist in Final Fantasy VII, where it's just like that humanizes the characters, and that makes me love them even more than I already did.
It makes everything hit harder too. Everything hits harder. Everything. Or even the smaller stuff, like, you know, you can have like these tiny moments where it's just Cloud and Tifa having like a conversation over the bar, and then you can have the deeper stuff like the plate falling and Barrett trying to deal with the loss of his daughter and his allies.
That was horrific.
You know,
that was horrific.
Yeah, it tears you up in a way that 7 couldn't.
Yeah.
But 7 is clearly trying to be a fantasy storyline that is set on the scale of, oh, this is a big epic. Like, but 7 Remake feels like these are people caught up in this epic story rather than them being the epic story.
Yeah, they are the epic characters of the tale. Whereas this, they're just normal people. Like, you know, in a fantasy world where it's like Cloud can, like, you know, run off all of the falling debris and do the jumps and stuff like an adventure and stuff like that. But at the same time, like, they are just people who are caught up in crazy like events that like they're way out of their depth for, and they don't even know what's coming. But yeah, it's like it hits so hard. Like, I've played the original game. I know what happens when you get to Sector 7 and the plate's gonna fall. And in that way, it's like, okay, I like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge a lot more this time. But I know what's gonna happen. I'm prepared. And then you go through that level, and then like you get to see the characters like and quote unquote meet their final fates. They kinda don't. But that's really neither here nor there in the moment. And it's like, it's intercut with, you keep going back to Aerith, he's running through the slums looking for Marlene, which is what she did in the original game. You just get to play it now. And like, that is just moment after moment of just like really powerful emotional payoffs to everything that's come before.
It's very raw. And you just made me think, you know when Marlene and Aerith have a talk behind the bar?
Yeah.
and there's that little like kind of moment of static.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that Aerith shared some kind of foresight with Marlene to show her that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, yeah, I got that feeling as well.
Yeah,
Especially thinking back on it from where I'm at
but that's the
now,
thing. Yeah,
having
um,
played it to
yeah, that's the thing with
completion.
Aerith though. Like Aerith, everything like we all know what happens to Aerith in the original game, and that makes every moment with her like a little bit bittersweet. Everything's a little like there's a little bit of melancholy in every scene that she's in, because you get so much closer to her in this game. Like she's so funny for starters. Like
She's
she's so
fantastic.
funny and charming and interesting and goofy. She's exactly who she should have been in this remake. And it helps because when they were developing the game, they stopped looking at like Advent Children and what the fans what they thought the fans made the characters into, and more about who are these characters in Final Fantasy VII, detached from the expectations of others, detached from everything else. Who are these characters? And so when they developed them, they made them very authentic because they were going with the source material and ignoring this bigger picture stuff that,
Yeah.
let's be honest, all the bigger stuff that surrounds Final Fantasy VII is much weaker than Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, 100%.
Advent Children is a good film. It's got a load of trashy moments in it. It doesn't capture the feeling of Final Fantasy VII very well. Crisis Core is closer. Like Maximilian dude said, Zack is like a real person trapped in a world, in like a game full of cartoons, cartoon people. It's true. Like Zack's like he feels like the precursor to Final Fantasy VII Remake in the sense that he feels like the only person that would fit in that world.
Bodes well for
Meanwhile,
the future.
if they would have, yeah, and like I just seeing all these characters, and again go back to Aerith, like every moment gets more heart wrenching, and knowing the fates of characters and what is ahead of them, it's very hype inducing. Knowing that like, damn, now we get to see this version of Barrett talk to Marlene's real father, and you actually get to, I mean, that's not a big spoiler, but like, and you get these moments where it's like, holy crap, we get to see the gold saucer. We get to see all of this world that's done to the caliber of the remake. And yeah, it's very difficult not to be excited when the main pull of the game, which I dare say is the characters, is so strong. Yeah.
It is. I think it is. I think it's the core cast of like 9 characters.
Yeah, I mean, even the outside characters like Shinra's son and all the weird goons that are at the top of the hierarchy in Shinra, each one of them incredible. Hojo, amazing. That man is a haunting
terrifying.
ghoul of a man.
He is so creepy in this game. Like,
I love it. I want him to dial up that to like 20, 30, just go all out, because that man is genuinely terrifying. The gluttonous one that spills the tea, like
Palmer.
Yeah, all of them, like they all seem to have been designed to have a much bigger role in this game and the future of this game too.
Yeah, definitely.
They didn't really hold much of a print on me in the original. Like I can't even remember if they were. You know. Yeah, I know they had like a presence, but it's forgetting. Like they're forgetful characters in the original.
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of stuff that is forgettable in Final Fantasy VII isn't forgettable in Remake, or doesn't feel like it's going to be forgettable going forward. Like, you just need to look at Biggs, Jessie, and Wedge for that, where it's like you actually felt emotion when the plate falls and they're all dead, or supposedly dead. Like, there's actual emotion there, whereas in the first game it's a footnote. Like, you kind of feel bad about the situation that occurs, but you don't like when you're running up the tower and you find Biggs, Jessie, and Wedge like at various points going up, it's like you don't really feel anything like for those characters because you don't know them.
Yeah, it's like a loss, but it's not like, oh, it doesn't hit you. Instead, you're like, oh, that's sad.
Yeah, you say it. You're like, it's sad. You recognize that the situation that is occurring in the game is sad, but you don't feel sad about it. Whereas in Chapter 12 of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's like devastating. It's devastating.
Yeah. They really drew that out of you too. Like, I was like bawling my eyes out. Like, I was like, oh, damn, like, we've just lost Biggs. And I knew that going up, we were going to lose Jessie. And I was like, I was feeling wrecked. Before I didn't want to continue. Knowing what was going to happen in the story. And
yeah, it's like even when Biggs gets me, like, and it's
Yeah.
just like,
And
oh, damn.
Biggs is a character that wasn't as deeply involved. Like even Jesse had more of a moment than Biggs, but Biggs still hit because he felt like a person. The little time that you spent with him, you got him as a person, and
Yeah,
you know,
like you get those little moments with them, and they make all the difference.
yeah,
Like when Biggs and Wedge are telling Cloud about Jesse's backstory, and then at the end of it, it's like you can't tell Jesse who said that; she'll kick the shit out of us. Like, there's like those
yeah.
little moments that you get because you do get basically an entire mission with them, an entire chapter with all three of them, which helps a lot to
Mm.
really like I could identify what they were doing where it was like this is gonna hurt, like doing this chapter and being like I really like these guys, like hanging out with them, like this is gonna hurt later on.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. No, honestly, it's true.
but that didn't make it hurt
Uh,
any less, like knowing what they were doing.
yeah. The thing is, though, adding settings like that, like getting to walk through that little town on the top plate, the little humble little rural almost
Whatever it
town with the
is, yeah.
cottages. That was a beautiful area. They like every area feels like a walking simulator almost. Like those kind of we put every detail into the game because you go so slow that
Yeah.
we have to. The game has almost that level of attention to detail throughout. There's some smaller areas that lack it, such as mainly dungeon style areas. They seem a little more rushed than like the big pieces in the game, set pieces in the game. But yeah, I mean, that's just reminded me in the sewers, the guy with the grey hair, that was like the only story bit I was like, I don't care really. That I don't know if that's harsh, but
Leslie, isn't it? It's it's
I'm not
it's a
sure.
nice story, but
Yeah, it's pleasant.
at the same time, it's like I get where you're coming from. It's like I didn't like I'd completely forgotten about that entire subplot until you just brought it up.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that was the only moment in the game where I was like, this doesn't have any longevity to it. This moment is keeping me away from the story that I am dying to continue with. And that's just because of how excited and how much I was enjoying the game. And I'll be really honest, there were times in the game where I was like, this is good, but I just want to see what happens next. But that's only because at the time, I didn't really understand. Like, it's not that I didn't necessarily understand, but I wasn't really taking full advantage of what the game was presenting me.
Yeah.
And so there were times in the game where I was just kind of like the sub quests that I skipped, the side quests. I skipped some of those and stuff, and then like once I got really far into the game and everything clicked together, I like felt almost like a sense of regret that I didn't take the earlier parts of the game slower.
Yeah.
Because as you play through the game, you really start to understand the scale and beauty of the game, and maybe that is going a little too far. I don't know, but that's just how I feel. Like
If that's how you feel, then that's how you feel. Like that's
the game's very special.
It is, and it's only whoa. What happened there? That was my computer. Just
I'm doing this on my phone. So
yeah. So that. Sorry, that was my computer, not anyone listening. So don't worry about it. So yeah. All right. So I want to start wrapping this up now because it's been an hour.
No problem. I could go on for like another hour easily.
Oh, we're not done. What I want you to think. What's one thing, if you've got one, like, what's one more thing that you want to mention about Final Fantasy VII Remake that we haven't already talked about?
The bosses and monsters, the combat in general. Yeah. That whole sector of the game, the whole chunk of game we haven't discussed yet, which is the combat side of it.
Yeah, I love the combat. I do. Like I said at some point in this discussion, it took me a while to get into it, like to get into the rhythm of it. But once you start flowing through it and you start realizing like what it wants from you, where it's like, oh, I do need to keep switching characters, like to get the most out of this combat system. Oh, I do need to be like using everybody's abilities. Oh, I do actually need to read what these assessments like are telling me about the different enemies. Oh, I can use elemental damage, like all this stuff where it's like, okay, cool. I'm like the basic bones of it, the structure of it is very familiar from Final Fantasy VII with like the materia and stuff, but the stuff that they've layered on top does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you're used to it, I was flying through it, having a great time.
Yeah, like I relate to that quite a little, but
Quite a lot.
yeah, just quite a little. Like I get what you're saying, Like for me, it was like, oh, this battle system has all of the strategy of
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII, but then it also has you no longer waiting idly for the bar to fill up. Instead, you now fill the bar up. And for me, it wasn't a case of like, oh, I'm gradually getting what this is about. It was more a case of discovering more and more and more to the battle system as you progress. Like discovering more about how to make use of the materia system, discovering more about making the best use of characters. Like, oh, I'm going to swap to Barrett because then I can fill up the ATB bar a little quicker by shooting, or I'll swap to Tifa so I can use cast haste on a character. And like just flipping between them to make the most of each other. Like as you play through the game, you gain a mastery of the combat. And to me, that was like they finally brought all of the meat that was in the classic Final Fantasy games and actually delivered it in a more acceptable package for today's standards.
In the action gameplay that they've been trying to get going for the last decade.
It doesn't even feel like an action game. I mean, it does feel like an action game, but it feels like it's not losing any of its identity as an RPG in order to cater to a more action-like gameplay. Like it has both at the same time, and it weaves them together into like a perfect ballet. And to me, it was just amazing. Yeah, I want more of it.
I love controlling Tifa. I just did. Like when she started unlocking some of the abilities that she could use, like oh my god, like she was my like ace in the hole.
Yeah.
Like, later on in the game when he had like moves like Star Shower, which looks amazing every time she does it, or like
and the damage.
Yeah, the damage she does. Like it's ridiculous. She's insane. Like, I mean, I loved all four. Again, there's only 4 playable characters, which is mind-blowing. Actually, when you sit down and think about it, it's like, yeah, it was only 4 characters that were playable in this entire game, but, like, it's like you barely even notice, like, there's not that many.
Yeah.
Like,
especially when you have so much control over how these characters pan out. Like, for me, Cloud became like a black mage that was also great at fighting. Tifa became like this killing machine with physical attacks. Barrett was long distance so that no matter what, I could always, like, keep him aside to make sure I can heal people and bring people back from the dead if they died. Like it was amazing making the characters your own. You didn't feel like you were missing anything because each character plays so differently, but you also get to customize them not only through materia, not only through the weapons that all have unique abilities that you can unlock through proficiency, just like the Final Fantasy IX accessory system. Not only can you then customize the weapons individually to add buffs and perks and advantages to them, but then you can swap that on the fly based on what situation that you're pulled into. It was amazing. And then there's the summoning materia too. The summoning system's amazing. Yeah. It's quite like it doesn't obstruct you too much. It doesn't get in the way of itself. Like it's just clean and it allows you to do new things that are quite spectacular to look at, and the finishes that they do are beautiful. And then, you know, on top of that is the bosses, which is like one of the best parts of the game. Like Definitely. The boss fights are unbelievable.
Definitely.
Probably the best bosses I've ever played in a game. I said it earlier, like I genuinely believe it. I was like in tears because, like, as a video game designer and a nerd, like some of the things they were doing with the actual bosses were making me cry. I was like, that is so smart. Like the boss that was on the elevator near the end of the game, I was like, how are they going to bring that back? And then when it was in the cutscene, I was like, oh, they're doing it in a cutscene form. Fair enough.
No.
But then when it became a fight, and it was one of the most amazing fights in the game, when you actually feel in this game like all the bosses are trying to kill you, which isn't something you feel a lot in a lot of games. It's why I compared it to Dark Souls early in terms of the depth of the story. I also feel that level of like the depth of like combat with the enemies actually trying to hurt you and kill you. They don't just feel like they're an obstacle like in many games. The bosses are best examples of that. Like seeing like the Scorpion tank, it feels like it's trying to get you dead. It's trying to like stop you. And so the sense of reward of beating these things, especially the phases that they go through, and the fact that you are constantly thinking and shifting and you have to stay dynamic. And other than the fact that you can always tell when a boss is coming because there's a bench right in front of the room that you fight in.
You're looking out and there's like this big, huge square arena and you're like,
Yeah. Why is
Maybe I'll just go back to the item shop for a second.
Yeah, when you can get like ethers and stuff for like a third of the price, you know, the boss coming.
It was always at the end of the game, wasn't it? It was always like you think, and it's like it's got the special offer items, and it was always like 3 mega potions, two ethers, and 2 Phoenix Downs, you're like, well, guess there's a boss fight coming up.
Yeah, they should have left them like towards the third quarter of dungeons and scenes like that to give you enough time, or maybe do it so that you heal yourself before, but there's no combat before you face the boss, just to throw the player off a little.
Yeah.
But honestly, holy crap! Like there was a couple of bosses where I was like, I'll be really honest, the Rufus boss fight on the rooftop, I wasn't a huge fan of. I thought it was a good boss fight. The spectacle of being on the top of Shinra, like the center Shinra Tower HQ, was really cool. I just thought it was a little too easy to cheese, which isn't something you can do with any other boss in the game. Every other boss takes skill and understanding and, you know, like I say, like a sense of dexterity and adaptability to defeat. But to me, he felt a little cheap. But maybe that's just because the way I was fighting him just made it feel that way.
I like that. That was probably, I was going to say that was probably one of my favorite boss fights.
Really?
Yeah, that one.
That's fair.
The Reno fight. I guess I just like the sword fighting. Like,
yeah.
Now that I think about it, like the one-on-one sword fighting, because the fight with Reno is when you really learn about counters for the first time. Like that's when the game forces you to be like, look, counter attacks. You got to pay attention to this shit.
And that was something I neglected through most of the playthrough, which probably makes sense why I found Rufus a little bit tedious. Like, yeah, I knew that you could just attack him when he was reloading, but I just ended up going to this cycle of, I'm just going to hide far away enough so that he can't hit me, and I'm going to hit him with thunder, and I'm just going to rinse him.
Yeah, fair enough. That might be why. Yeah, because I was like, my strategy for that fight was completely different.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot more to it, but as someone who hadn't parried that often, I mainly played it more traditionally. I guess that was the issue. I went too much into the strategy side, not quite enough into the action, but it just shows that there's a lot of different ways that you can approach the game. Like,
definitely,
you can take as much of the action side of it or as much of the tactical side of it, and you'll still find the bosses and the combat amazing. Just make sure you take care to focus on both at least a little.
What was your favorite? What was your favorite boss?
Honestly, I think it was the elevator boss. I can't remember the name of it, but the boss after the elevator scene. Just because, like, when it dropped the walls of fire at either side of you, and it's doing the lasers. Oh, it was amazing.
And you got the pillars, and it's the thing that you learned from the very beginning of the game, where it's like, okay, the boss is going to fire a laser and you hide behind a pillar, like that kind of thing. Like,
yeah, it was a great callback. But I did like the Whisper, the giant Whisper boss. It was very much like a Kingdom Hearts. It felt like Kingdom Hearts in the moment in time. You know, I was like, this is like a very realistic, beautiful Kingdom Hearts moment. But at the same time, I'll give it credit. It's only because Kingdom Hearts was inspired by like the great last bosses of old Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
You know, it did feel like the end of a Final Fantasy game when you were fighting that giant boss, even if it was like you were fighting it through a secondary means. I also really enjoyed the Sephiroth fight at the end. I thought that was brilliant. It felt like a big group of like, hey, we do this together, and it was very like, you know, maybe a little cheesy in that sense, but it was so good.
No, I like that moment. Where everybody comes in, it's like Cloud's fighting, and then Tifa comes in and does her thing, and then Bart comes in and does his thing. The boss was called the Arsenal.
Yeah.
My favorite boss was Hell House, without a shadow of a doubt.
The fact that you made this is one thing we should mention before we wrap up. They made all the weird stuff work. They made the weird stuff work, and I didn't think that was. I like the cross dressing out. No, it isn't. They could have made Cloud look a little bit cuter. I'll be honest. Where's the padding and the bra?
Yeah,
I'm just saying. But
right.
like they made him look like a guy wearing a dress. They should have gone all out. He's a very pretty boy.
He's a very pretty boy.
Yeah, like I mean, all the cast is
and a very good, very very good dancer. Like,
well, true. That was one of the only things I was like, I was sat there next to my sister like, why is this happening? Why is the camera trying to fool me?
Yeah, he's doing everything he can. He's doing everything he has to do to save his friend. But if I got a full game, like a Persona dancing all night spin-off, and it was just Cloud dancing at the Honeybee Inn while Aerith is losing her shit in the audience, just being like, this is amazing. Like, I'd be fine. I could take that as an entire game experience. Like, that was the one. That was my one thing I wanted to mention before the end was like the Honeybee Inn section, which I was so nervous about, like going into this game, because I was like, there's 99 ways this can go wrong, and one way can go right. I felt
And
like
it went
going in,
right.
and it was the one way where it was like, oh my fucking god,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
It was very campy. It had this very strong burlesque feeling about it, but they did it perfect. And like you said, Aerith, like with her, when she was super happy about it and stuff and cheering for Cloud, oh, it was so cute.
Yeah,
But
like the look on her face when like they do the reveal thing where because they make him up just on the stage and they pull the thing away and like the chair goes up and Aerith's like reaction is just perfect. And then like they don't make a joke of it like they do in Final Fantasy VII, where it's like the joke is haha man wearing dress, whereas in this it's like it's really wholesome. Like the entire sequence is just really wholesome.
It's beautiful, yeah. And the only thing I didn't like was actually pressing the buttons in time with the music because the camera was shifting and I was so distracted by what was on screen.
It was very difficult. It was very difficult because like it wasn't like a normal rhythm game section. It was like the camera's pointing one way and then like the button prompt is almost pointing in a completely different direction and it's in a weird place on the screen and it was a bit weird. Yeah, but I love that
it was brilliant.
The whole stretch of that was just.
It was amazing.
Perfect.
It was amazing. They really did the entire game justice, and those are the moments that prove it most. Maybe like they're not like the most like whoa mind-blowing moments, but they're the moments where they showed their true sincerity for the original source material to leave stuff like Hell House in the game, something that just shouldn't have fit in that world,
and
in the more believable, realistic world.
It's believable. You go into this thing with Hell House, and it's like, oh, this actually works. Like in the fiction that I'm like in the fictional world that I'm playing through, it's like Hell House actually fits.
Yeah.
How did they do that? Like Hell House is the stupidest enemy in like Final Fantasy history, but they made it work. And not only did they make it work, it's one of the most like for me anyway, it's one of the most memorable boss fights in the game. That's crazy.
Totally agree. Yeah, like it is one of the best. Like one of the most like it's funny the fact that Hell House is even in the game, but the fact they made it into this boss that takes ages to fight because the character that is so full of tricks. And
like you've got to watch you've got to like watch what like for its because it changes its elemental resistances and you've got to be on the ball when you're fighting it and like you've got the because it's in like the Colosseum, right? And then you've got all the announcers like doing the stuff and they've got so many different lines for all the different things that can happen while you're fighting it and the whole like. I love the whole thing.
Honestly, amazing. A lot of people say that Walmart is their favorite part of the game.
It probably is. Like, thinking about it, I feel like Chapter 12 is probably the one that's going to stick with me more than anything else. And I did enjoy the Shinra building stuff, but the Walmart section was really good.
Yeah, it's a shame they changed the music though.
There's so much
that was the only
music
thing
in
I
this
wasn't
game.
a huge fan. I wasn't a huge fan of the changes of placement in music, but we've got to give them credit. Contextually, it all makes perfect sense. The music fits the scenes probably better than what the original soundtrack would have done with the new visuals and feeling and atmosphere that's delivered. Yeah. So I can see why they changed it completely.
And
as a fan of Wall Market's music, I really wanted to hear Wall Market's music in that area. Yeah,
you do hear it, but they have moved stuff around.
Which is fine.
I like the fact that there's like all sorts of different like mixes for the like one song isn't just one song like it is in the original game. There's like loads of different versions, variations of it. Where there's like a version of it for when you're exploring, and then there's a version of it for when it'll transition into if a fight starts, and
because that's one thing to note is the fact that in this game you don't have the battle theme anymore. Yeah, it's in a lot of the songs in the game. There's so many different renditions of the battle theme.
Yeah.
And so many renditions of Still More Fighting and stuff like that in the game. And they're all amazing. So well executed that it never gets boring. But the fact that during more casual battles, you'll be hearing the main area music and it'll transition seamlessly into like a more pumped up, juiced up, fiery battle theme version of that area. It was amazing. It fit perfectly. And then there's the odd occasion where Barrett like,
Barrett was amazing doing stuff like that.
But it was amazing.
Did you get the bit where he's singing when you're in the
reactor?
reactor?
When you climb the ladders.
Oh no, I was talking about when you're on a
Stairs,
lift.
sorry.
You. Oh,
Oh,
I mean, I climbed the stairs. Of course, I climbed the stairs. That's one of the most iconic things you can do in Final Fantasy VII, and
yeah.
it was perfect. Like going up
Yeah,
59 flights of
it was
stairs.
tedious on purpose. And it was great. The dialogue was so funny. But you can actually walk back down the stairs and then go up the elevator, and you get unique dialogue apparently and stuff.
Oh.
Unique situation happens. Yeah, I'll do that next time when I've got another 3 hours spare.
But yeah, like I mean, we could talk about even more moments on top of even more moments because this game is full of them. But I think it's probably best if we draw the discussion to a close there.
I'm gonna
'cause that's
say
perfect.
if they listen to this like 20 times, they'll be able to beat the game. So
Yeah, absolutely.
you could get out of the first Mako reactor in the time it took to listen to this.
Yeah, sure. And
So,
I
yeah,
should know I've
that's
done
how-
it multiple times.
That's how full it is of amazing moments. It's an amazing game.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the bombing mission is what, like 20 minutes in the first game, but it's like an hour and change in the second game, the remake game.
Yeah.
Even if you played it multiple times, because that's what I noticed when I was playing it the full game. Like I'd played the bombing mission twice before I played the full game because I played the demo that was on PlayStation, and then I played the demo at EGX, and it's like you don't really go much quicker. if you've played it 3 times, it's like no, it's still pretty much the same length.
Yeah, it's got a steady pace to it.
Even if I know how to beat the Scorpion boss really like ingrained in my memory and whatnot, it's like it's still pretty steady.
Yeah, yeah. One thing to mention before we wrap up though is that Tifa's landlady is amazing.
Mel?
She's amazing.
Mel.
Yeah, Mal, I think her name is, or something like that.
Yeah, Mel.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. And yeah, the game itself is fantastic.
It is. Go buy it. Although you wouldn't really need us to tell you that if you've listened to this entire discussion, because this is a spoiler cast, and if you've listened to it without playing the game, I mean, thanks, but also why?
Yeah. It's still worth playing.
It's like, definitely still worth playing.
For an hour and 40 minutes, and you still want to play the remake.
You absolutely should. Like, yeah, it's hype. It's pure hype from start to finish.
Yeah. Kids call it poggers.
Poggers, that's the one. I see that happen in Twitch sometimes.
It's going to be hard to beat this game. I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time to come. And I'll have to share more of the theories that they've got with you as well after this is over.
Oh yeah, we'll keep talking after this is over. That's fine. Might need to go get a drink.
Yeah. But honestly, look at all the resources and stuff that people have been talking. All the theories. Listen to Maximilian, dude. Watch his channel and stuff in general.
The Easy Allies part. I saw the Easy Allies spoiler mod pop up, but I was still playing the game at the time, so it was one of those things where I was like, I'll pop that away for later. Because full disclosure, I am a Patreon supporter of Easy Allies, so.
Yeah, honestly, it was an amazing thing, and Maximilian, dude, just talks through most of it. It's so good, and he's actually been playing through the game, and he was the one, like, I was halfway through the game, and I was watching him as I was playing through it. So, like, I'd play chapter, 4 or 5, and then I'd be watching him play through 1 and 2. And, seeing his deep appreciation for the game, because a fun little story is that Square Enix used his reaction video for the announcement of VII Remake. They used that as their main source of inspiration. So whenever they were feeling down, they'd watch the video together. And he is such a dear, honest, wonderful person, and he loves Final Fantasy VII and loves the remake. So yeah, he's an amazing person to watch through.
Makes me wish I'd been a streamer when they announced Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because I lost my mind.
Damn, I bet you did. I was too concerned. I wasn't a huge fan of 15. I felt it lost a lot of the appeal of what made me a Final Fantasy fan, which is fine. I'm old school. And so for 7, I was worried they were going to do that. For them to go completely the other way and just they've given me a lot of faith in what that company can do in the future. Final Fantasy 16 could end up being absolutely incredible.
It could.
If and when we get it. But
yeah, that's a discussion for another time where it's like, what does this mean for Final Fantasy 16? But I'm sure we'll find out. In the meantime, I'm going to wrap this video up. Thank you very much for joining me, Tori.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to have you back because you're a pretty
Maybe.
good podcast guest.
We'll see.
3 years from now when we've played Final Fantasy The Unknown Journey, or whatever they end up calling it. we'll get back and we'll be like, so what do you think? We'll do our own part 2 of this video.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be cool.